What happens when royalty meets reality television, and the clash is so intense that 36 seconds of heated words turns into an all-out war on live television? In just one comment about her lifestyle, everything falls apart. This is the story of how Meghan Markle walked onto Greg Gutfeld's show and walked off in a storm of fury. It started like any other night on Greg Gutfeld's show. The lights were bright. The studio audience was buzzing with energy. Greg sat behind his desk, relaxed and ready for what he thought would be a typical interview. His producers had told him that Meghan Markle agreed to come on to discuss her charity work and advocacy projects. Simple enough, right? Wrong. From the moment Meghan walked onto the set, there was tension in the air. She smiled for the cameras, waved to the audience, and took her seat across from Greg. But anyone watching closely could see something was off. Her smile seemed forced. Her body language was stiff. She sat down and immediately crossed her arms. Greg started with a warm greeting. "Welcome to the show, Meghan. Thanks so much for being here tonight." She nodded, but her response was clipped. "Thank you for having me." Already, there was something strange. No warmth, no real engagement, just a cold acknowledgement. Greg, being the professional he is, pushed forward. He asked about her recent charity initiatives, her work with various organizations, and her plans for the future. Meghan's answers were long, very long. She talked about herself constantly. Every question became an opportunity for her to share her own struggles, her own journey, her own perspectives. She barely let Greg finish his questions before she launched into monologues about her experiences. "You know, Greg," she said at one point, interrupting him mid-sentence, "I have faced more challenges than most people could ever understand. The scrutiny I've dealt with, the way the media has treated me, it's been absolutely relentless." Greg tried to redirect. "Well, a lot of people deal with media attention. How do you think your experience compares to, say, other public figures who also face criticism?" Her eyes narrowed. "Are you seriously comparing my situation to anyone else's? Do you have any idea what it's like to be targeted the way I have been?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was supposed to be a friendly interview, but it was quickly becoming something else. Greg maintained his composure. He smiled politely and tried again. "I'm just saying that many people in the public eye face tough criticism. It's part of being in the spotlight. How do you manage it?" Meghan leaned back in her chair, her expression hardening. "Manage it? You don't manage it, Greg. You survive it. And not everyone has the strength to do that. I've had to develop a thick skin just to get through each day." Greg nodded, trying to keep things light. "Sure, I get that. But at the same time, you've also chosen a very public life. You've done interviews, documentaries, public appearances. Don't you think that comes with the territory?" That was the first real spark. Meghan's face changed. The polite mask slipped for just a second, revealing something sharper underneath. "Chosen," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You think I chose to be attacked? You think I chose to have lies written about me every single day?" "I'm not saying you chose to be attacked," Greg replied calmly. "I'm saying that public figures, including you, make choices about how much they share with the world. And when you share a lot, people are going to have opinions. That's just reality." Meghan's jaw tightened. She looked like she was about to say something harsh, but then seemed to catch herself. She took a breath and forced another smile. "Well, maybe if you had walked in my shoes, you'd understand," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. The audience was silent now. You could feel the tension building. Greg, still keeping his cool, decided to move on. "Let's talk about your charity work," he said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "You've been involved with several organizations. What drives you to do that work?" Meghan launched into another long speech about her passion for helping others, how she's always been an advocate for the underdog, and how her life's mission is to make the world a better place. It went on and on. Greg tried to interject a few times, but she talked over him every single time. Finally, when she paused to take a breath, Greg jumped in. That's great, really. But I have to ask, and I think a lot of people wonder this, how do you balance your advocacy work with the lifestyle you lead? I mean, you live in a mansion in California. You travel on private jets. So you wear designer clothes that cost more than most people make in a year. How do you reconcile that with speaking about inequality and helping the less fortunate? The room went completely silent. Every eye was on Meghan. Her face turned red. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice sharp as glass. Greg remained calm. It's a fair question. A lot of people talk about helping others while living very comfortably. I'm just curious how you see that. Meghan's eyes blazed. How dare you? How dare you sit there and question my commitment to helping people? You have no idea what I've sacrificed. You have no idea what I've given up to do this work. I'm not questioning your commitment, Greg said, his voice steady. I'm asking about the contradiction that some people see. You can't deny that you live a very privileged life. Privileged? Meghan practically shouted. You want to talk about privilege? You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes and criticizing people who actually do something meaningful with their lives? What have you done, Greg? What have you actually contributed to the world besides tearing other people down? The audience gasped. This was getting ugly fast. Greg, to his credit, didn't take the bait. He stayed professional. I'm not here to talk about me. This interview is about you. And I'm asking questions that I think are fair and that a lot of viewers would want answered. Meghan stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. I came here to have a respectful conversation, and instead you ambush me with these insulting questions. You don't respect me. You don't respect what I do. You're just like all the rest of them. Greg held up his hands. Meghan, I'm not ambushing you. I'm doing my job. I ask tough questions to everyone who comes on this show. That's what journalism is. Journalism? She scoffed. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job. You brought me here to make me look bad. Well, congratulations, Greg. You got your moment. I hope you're proud of yourself. She ripped off her microphone and threw it onto the chair. The sound echoed through the studio. The producers were scrambling. The audience sat in stunned silence. Greg tried one more time. Meghan, please sit down. Let's talk this through. But she was already walking off the set. I'm done here, she called over her shoulder. You can air whatever you want. Twist my words however you like. That's what you people do best anyway. As she stormed toward the exit, she turned back one more time, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You know what your problem is, Greg? You're small. You're small-minded. You're petty, and you'll never understand what it means to actually stand for something. Enjoy your little show while it lasts. And with that, she was gone. The studio doors slammed shut behind her. Greg sat at his desk, looking directly at the camera. Well, he said, breaking the silence. That was interesting. Folks, I want to be clear. I asked fair questions. I treated her with respect. I gave her every opportunity to explain her positions. And when things got uncomfortable, instead of engaging in a real conversation, she chose to walk away and hurl insults. Man, that tells you everything you need to know. He paused, letting his words sink in. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, activists, people from all walks of life. And you know what the difference is between them and what you just saw. They can handle being questioned. They can defend their positions without melting down. They don't run away when someone challenges them to think critically. The audience started to applaud. Slowly at first, then building. They could see what had happened. They watched someone who claimed to be an advocate for truth and transparency completely fall apart when asked to explain herself. Greg continued, Look, I have no personal issue with Meghan Markle. But when you position yourself as a voice for the voiceless, when you claim to be fighting for justice and equality, you have to be willing to answer tough questions. You have to be willing to explain how your actions match your words. And if you can't do that, if you resort to personal attacks and storming off sets, then maybe you need to take a hard look in the mirror. The cameras stayed on Greg as he wrapped up. His tone was measured, his demeanor professional. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate what had happened. He simply pointed out what everyone had just witnessed. "We invited her here for an honest conversation," Greg said. "We gave her a platform. We asked questions that needed to be asked. And when she couldn't handle it, she blamed me. She blamed the show. She blamed everyone except herself. That's not strength. That's not courage. That's entitlement." The production team was still in shock backstage. No one had expected things to escalate so quickly. Meghan had seemed calm when she arrived. She had gone through hair and makeup without incident. She had chatted pleasantly with the crew. But the moment she sat down for the actual interview, something changed. One of the producers whispered to another, "Did that really just happen?" "Yeah," came the reply, "and we got it all on camera." Back on set, Greg addressed the audience directly. "I want you all to know that I stand by every question I asked tonight. I would ask them again tomorrow if I had the chance. Because that's what we do here. We don't give anyone a free pass just because of who they are or what title they hold. We treat everyone the same. We ask the questions that need asking." The audience applauded again, louder this time. They appreciated his honesty. They appreciated that he didn't back down, even when things got heated. "Now, I'm sure there will be people who say I was too hard on her," Greg continued. "I'm sure there will be people who say I should have gone easier, that I should have let her talk without pushing back. But here's the thing. If you come on a talk show, you have to be ready to talk. You have to be ready for dialogue, not monologue. You have to be ready to defend your positions. Not just state them and expect everyone to nod along." He leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "And when you can't handle that, when you resort to insults and name-calling, when you storm off like a child throwing a tantrum, you lose all credibility. You prove that you're not really interested in conversation. You're interested in control. You want to control the narrative, control the questions, control how people see you. And when you lose that control, you fall apart." The studio was buzzing now. People were talking among themselves, processing what they had just seen. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others were nodding in agreement with Greg's assessment. Greg took a deep breath and smiled slightly. "All right, folks, that's all the excitement we have for tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing that with me. And remember, always ask questions. Always think critically. Never let anyone, no matter who they are, tell you that you're not allowed to challenge them. That's how we get to the truth." The show went to commercial, but the energy in the studio remained electric. Crew members were already talking about how quickly the footage would spread. This wasn't just another interview. This was a moment. A real, unscripted moment where the mask slipped and people got to see what happens when entitlement meets accountability. Greg stood up from his desk and stretched. Then he walked over to where his producers were gathered. "Well, that was something," one of them said. Greg shrugged. "I asked fair questions. She couldn't handle it. Simple as that." "Do you think she'll respond publicly?" another producer asked. "Probably," Greg replied. "She'll probably say I was disrespectful, that I attacked her, that I had some agenda. But everyone who watched will know the truth. They saw what happened. They heard the questions. They saw her reaction. No amount of spin will change that." And he was right. Because what happened that night wasn't about politics or personal vendettas. It was about someone who had built an entire image around being brave and speaking truth to power, completely crumbling when asked to apply those same standards to herself. The moment Meghan walked onto that set, she expected to be treated like royalty. She expected softball questions and endless praise. She expected everyone to sit quietly while she delivered her prepared talking points. But Greg Gutfeld doesn't work that way. He asks real questions. He pushes back. He challenges his guests to think and defend their positions. And when Meghan realized she wasn't going to get the easy ride she wanted, when she understood that she would actually have to answer for the contradictions in her life and message, she couldn't handle it. She lashed out. She insulted Greg personally. She tried to make it about him instead of about the legitimate questions he was asking. That's what made her final comments so revealing. Calling Greg small-minded, petty, saying he would never understand what it means to stand for something. Those weren't the words of someone defending their position. Those were the words of someone who knew they had lost the argument and were desperately trying to regain some sense of superiority. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Greg remained calm, professional, focused on the substance of the conversation. Meghan became emotional, defensive, and ultimately ran away. One person acted like an adult having a difficult conversation. The other acted like someone who had never been told no in their life. As the crew packed up for the night, they kept replaying the moment in their minds. The way her face changed when Greg asked about her lifestyle. The way her voice got louder and sharper with each response. The way she stood up so suddenly, so dramatically, as if she was making some grand statement by leaving. But walking away from hard questions isn't brave. It's cowardly. It's what people do when they know they can't defend themselves with logic or reason. It's what people do when they're used to everyone around them just accepting whatever they say without question. Greg had given her every opportunity. He started friendly. He gave her space to talk about her work. He let her go on at length about her experiences and her advocacy. But when it came time to dig deeper, to ask the questions that actually mattered, she couldn't rise to the occasion. The question about her lifestyle wasn't unfair. It wasn't a gotcha. It was a straightforward inquiry that millions of people have wondered about. How do you advocate for the less fortunate while living in extraordinary luxury? How do you talk about inequality while benefiting so much from the system you claim to critique? These are valid questions. These are important questions. And Meghan's inability to answer them without melting down speaks volumes. It shows that she had never really thought about it. Or worse, that she had thought about it and knew there was no good answer, so she just hoped no one would ever ask. But Greg asked. And that's what good journalists do. They ask the questions others are afraid to ask. They hold people accountable, especially people with power and influence. They don't give free passes based on fame or status. The audience understood this. That's why they applauded Greg after Meghan left. They recognized that he had done his job. He had asked tough but fair questions. He had remained respectful even when she became hostile. He had given her multiple chances to engage in real dialogue, and she threw it all away with her temper tantrum. She proved every criticism people had about her, that she's entitled, that she can't handle being challenged, that she expects special treatment, that she views herself as above the kind of scrutiny everyone else has to endure. This wasn't a case of a host ambushing a guest. This was a case of a guest expecting to control the entire conversation and losing their composure when they realized they couldn't. This was a case of someone who talks constantly about courage and strength, showing neither quality when it actually mattered. The way Meghan ripped off her microphone and threw it down was particularly telling. It was theatrical. It was designed for maximum drama. It was meant to make Greg look bad, to make it seem like he had done something so terrible that she couldn't possibly stay another second. But it backfired, because everyone watching could see through it. They could see that it was an act, a performance designed to distract from the fact that she had no good answers to give. If she had really been confident in her positions, she would have stayed and defended them. She would have explained her perspective calmly and rationally. Instead, she chose the path of least resistance. She chose to play the victim. She chose to attack Greg personally rather than address the substance of his questions. And in doing so, she revealed exactly who she is. This moment will be remembered not as an example of a host being unfair, but as an example of what happens when privilege meets accountability. When someone who has been insulated from real criticism for so long finally faces it and completely falls apart. Greg handled it perfectly. He didn't chase after her. He didn't beg her to come back. He simply turned to the camera and explained what had happened. He let the audience draw their own conclusions based on what they had just witnessed. And those conclusions were clear. Meghan Markle came on the show expecting to be celebrated. She expected everyone to sit quietly while she talked about herself and her causes. She expected to leave with her image intact and maybe even enhanced. But that's not what happened. What happened was that she got asked real questions by a real journalist, and she couldn't handle it. She revealed herself to be exactly what critics have said all along, entitled thin-skinned and unable to accept any form of accountability. The 36 seconds it took for Greg to ask about her lifestyle was all it took for everything to unravel. 36 seconds to go from polite interview to explosive confrontation. 36 seconds for the mask to slip completely off. That's how fragile the whole thing was. That's how little it took to expose the reality behind the carefully crafted image. One honest question, one moment of actual journalism, and it all came crashing down. Greg Gutfeld showed that night what integrity looks like. He showed what it means to do your job even when it's uncomfortable. He showed what it means to treat everyone equally, regardless of their status or fame. He asked the questions that needed to be asked, and he didn't back down when the answers got difficult. Meghan Markle showed what happens when someone who preaches about strength and courage doesn't actually possess those qualities. She showed what entitlement looks like when it's challenged. She showed that all her talk about advocacy and fighting for others was just that. Talk. Because when it mattered, when she had a chance to demonstrate real conviction and real strength, she folded. She ran. She threw insults and accusations instead of engaging with the actual issues. That's the story of what happened that night on Greg Gutfeld's show. Not a story of ambush or unfairness. A story of accountability, meeting entitlement, and entitlement, losing badly. A story of a journalist doing his job and a guest being unable to handle it. In 36 seconds, everything changed. In 36 seconds, the truth came out. And no amount of spin or damage control could put that genie back in the bottle. The world saw what happened. They saw who kept their composure and who lost it. They saw who asked fair questions and who couldn't answer them. That they saw Greg Gutfeld be a professional. And they saw Meghan Markle be exactly what people suspected she was all along. The whole exchange lasted less than 15 minutes. But in that short time, so much was revealed. Greg tried multiple times to steer back to productive ground. He gave Meghan chance after chance to explain her positions without getting defensive. But she couldn't do it. Every attempt to redirect was met with more hostility. Every question was treated as an attack. That's not the behavior of someone secure in their beliefs. That's the behavior of someone who knows their positions are weak. The most damning part was her complete lack of self-awareness. She accused Greg of being small-minded while displaying the smallest possible mind. She talked about respect while showing none to the host who invited her on his show. Greg stayed in his seat the entire time. He never raised his voice. He never became emotional. He simply asked questions and listened to answers. And when those answers revealed contradictions, he pointed it out. That's his job. And he did it perfectly well,